Alrighty, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, our first blanks in our bulletins as we get going, or you have that little slip of paper. Our first blank to fill in is anonymous never means unnecessary. Anonymous never means unnecessary. Sometimes in church we have roles, we have jobs that people do that are kind of anonymous, you know. We have, like for example, this week we have a couple of guys that are going to come to help me set up tables and chairs for our Wednesday night meal. You know, they're not the people that normally their names are all over the bulletin and everybody says, but it gets done, you know, and you know, it's a necessary job, but it's not one that always gets a lot of recognition and praise. So thank you for those guys who do that. There are other jobs in the church that people do, that financial secretaries and things like that somebody's got to do it, but you know, they don't always get a lot of recognition. So thank you for everybody who fills in one of those anonymous roles in the church. They're necessary. The behind-the-scenes kind of stuff that doesn't always get all the recognition. Thank you for doing those things, you know. I appreciate it so much. Anonymous never means unnecessary. And even if sometimes nobody else knows the work that you do, the Lord sees, the Lord rewards, and sometimes I'm not going to say sometimes, that's always a better reward than the little bit of, good job, clap on the back, you know. The reward in heaven way outweighs that clap that on the back. So thank you for working in those anonymous roles. And today we're going to see some of that wisdom here in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 13 through 18. So here we go. Ecclesiastes 9, 13 through 18. Anonymous never means unnecessary. Here we go. I also saw under the sun the example of wisdom that greatly impressed me. There once was a small city with only a few people in it, and a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built a huge siege work against it. Now, there lived in that city a man poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom, but nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength. But the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer heeded. The quiet words of the wise are more than to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Okay, this is kind of a sad parable, okay? The story here, there's a small town, a small hamlet, if you will, that is somewhere that happened to have a little bit of a wall around it for defense, but yet a mighty nation came up against this little village. Escape was impossible. They could not defend themselves. They were outnumbered, they were outmatched, they were outgunned, they were surrounded. But one wise villager, through his wisdom, through his diplomacy, was able to save the village. And that's wonderful news. The punchline is, however, years later, no one remembers the heroic act of this one poor but wise villager who saved the town. That's the parable that Solomon talks about here. There's an anonymous man who his wisdom saves the city, but he remains anonymous. Nobody even remembers his act of heroism. I think Solomon here is actually talking about a real-life story from his childhood. When King David, Solomon's father, was the king, Solomon was just a young boy. And while David was king, there was an insurrectionist who tried to overthrow the kingdom, and his name was Sheba. And he did not recognize David as king. He attempted a coup. The coup failed. And so Sheba fled to a mountain village in the far north of Israel. And the name of the town, I'll have to read it, is Abel Bach-Macaca. Okay? Really good one. Good to get the phlegm out of the back of the throat, you know. Abel Bach-Macaca. Okay? Now, very few people today have ever heard of the village of Abel Bach-Macaca. Okay? And why would they? You can't even pronounce it, right? So even the name is a mouthful. But here's where we pick up in the story. I'm going to read from 2 Samuel chapter 20. But here's where we pick up with the story, right? The Shivas ran to this village in hiding. And David and his armies are now going to go after this insurrectionist. Okay, so all the troops of Joab, that's David's general, came and besieged Sheba and Abel Bach-Macaca. They built up a siege ramp to the city, and it stood against the outer fortifications. And while they were there battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him. And he went towards her, and she asked, are you Joab? I am, he answered. And she said, listen to what your servant has to say. I'm listening. She continued, long ago they used to say, get your answer in Abel, and they settled it, and that settled it. We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel. Are you trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel? Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? Far be it from me, Joab replied. Far be it from me to swallow up and destroy. That is not the case. A man named